When discussing your favorite shonen, you'll hear that X or Y series has the best world building in human history. But if you ask me, world building is overrated. Or at least, we're all looking at it in the wrong way. And let me show you what everyone's missing. If you ask me, I don't think people really get world building, which might sound like a silly statement, and you know, that's fair, but I largely mean the way people approach discussions about what is good or bad world building. Generally, in these kinds of discussions, I like to make sure that we're all on the same page. World building is the building of a world. Yeah, that's real fucking clever, dude. But how does one build a world? It's quite simple, and in fact, world building is likely something that many of you have been doing since you were children. Crafting make-believe worlds, or creating your own narratives and stories with your action figures and your toys, or maybe you're Gen Alpha, so you're like watching, I don't know, Tung Tung Sahur? Does Tung Tung Sahur have world building? When you begin to consume a piece of media, and any kind really, it is going to attempt to immerse you into its world. Tolkien, author of the Lord of the Rings and Round World Builder, references the secondary belief, or the secondary world. All stories will start at the baseline, the primary world, our world. The author, at their own whim, can create an infinite amount of secondary worlds, or worlds that infer from the primary world, tweaking and altering the defaults of what would be expected and creating a secondary belief, or a suspension of disbelief, in which one imagines this secondary world as one that truly exists. Its own logic, its own culture, customs, language, geography, natural processes, and all of the logical conclusions that come from these transformations of the altering of the primary world. The story will generally reveal things when it's ultimately necessary to advance the plot. Now, advancing the plot is kind of vague, and if I had to be honest, I kind of disagree with the notion that every single thing has to advance the plot. Not every brushstroke of a painting is there to tell you what happens next. Sometimes you want to see the darkness lingering in the sky, or this cold isolation of a stone floor. You wouldn't call those strokes wasteful just because they don't move the subject of the painting across a canvas. They're making the world real to you. Tone, thematic reinforcement, and atmosphere are all equally as important as narrative progression, and because of that immersion that you've executed, the plot advancements can land when you get there. The reason climactic moments hit, whether they be reveals or tragic losses or triumphant victories, is because you were made to feel captured by the work, and world building is one aspect of capturing people. In the book Building Imaginary Worlds, The Theory and History of Subcreation by Mark J.P. Wolf, Wolf touches on what they perceive to be the three primary standards of world building: invention, completeness, and consistency. You might remember this from a video I made half a decade ago. Wolf argues, of course, no secondary world can be as complete as the primary world, inconsistencies are increasingly likely as the world grows, and no world can be the product of invention to the point that there is no longer any resemblance to the primary world. Nevertheless, unless an effort is made in all these directions, the resulting subcreation will fail to create the illusion of an independent world. Invention is defined as the degree to which the default assumptions based on the primary world have been changed, regarding such things as geography, history, language, physics, biology, zoology, culture, customs, and so on. Completeness refers to the degree to which the world contains explanations and details covering all the various aspects of its characters' experiences, and background details which together suggest a feasible, practical world. Consistency is the degree to which the world details are plausible, feasible, and without contradiction, working to prevent a sloppily constructed world or even a random world. I wanted to use a particular series as an example, and this likely won't surprise you considering it's the one most covered on my channel, ReZero. Generally, this is kinda taboo to bring up because isekai worlds are more often than not under the most scrutiny, and ReZero is not an exception to this rule. Even in my very own community and comments, its world building is criticized, but I would like to go to bat for it just a bit. And frankly, I'm only going to scratch the surface of the gigantic iceberg known as the ReZero world. That's possible, maybe one day I can make a video about an entire topic of ReZero's world building. Let me know in the comments if you think that would be interesting. Let's tackle it from the three staples we just mentioned, starting with inventiveness. If inventiveness pertains to how the primary world has been changed, well, I mean, that much is obvious. For those unfamiliar, ReZero is an isekai that takes place in an unnamed world. Unlike many other isekais that it stands shoulder to shoulder with, ReZero pretty quickly throws you into the idiosyncrasies of this world. First of all, it's a diorama-like world. It has 4 distinct edges with water that pours down somewhere. It seemingly has its own unique physical properties to make a world like this possible, including landmarks that wouldn't otherwise exist in a world like this, as well as ongoing mysteries about its seemingly artificial night sky and potentially moon, which you can learn more about that in this video. It has an expansive history with its 4 nations, some more than others of course, and zoology for its unique inhabitants. The animals of ReZero aren't the only unique inventions, however. The people of this world also have their own unique characteristics. I'm not even speaking about the demi-humans and their respective histories and plotlines, though those are sometimes robust. I'm specifically talking about the biology of every living thing in the ReZero world, which is where we can get into the completeness, the offered explanations for these ideas. You see, the ReZero world has mana, an energy that exists all around you and seemingly comes from the very center of the world, otherwise known as Ode Laguna, which is a whole can of worms we don't need to get into in this video. The mana floats around and essentially helps in sustaining not just people, but all living things' existences, and to do so, the creatures of the ReZero world have developed what amounts to an entirely unique organ, the Gate. The Gate allows mana to enter the body. Okay, that's cool, so the mana enters the body and what? Is it like blood? Not exactly, it's more akin to oxygen, because you see, another energy also dwells within all living beings. It's something synonymous to a soul called Ode. And yeah, Ode Laguna, Ode. Starting to make sense now, right? You can be born with lots of Ode, you can be born with very little Ode, but that Ode is basically a determiner of your lifespan, and when your Gate takes in the mana from the atmosphere, it is stored inside of your Ode. The mana can be pulled from your Ode, and your innate aptitude will charge the mana once it exits your Gate into a specific element, so it's a relationship between three aspects in something as simple as casting magic: mana, your Gate, and your Ode. And much like real life, there are variables to these factors that can impact your quality of life or lead to chronic conditions. First of all, mana can be corrupted, and taking a corrupted mana, or miasma, is effectively like sitting in a room without a carbon monoxide alarm. Like we mentioned earlier, your Ode is determined at birth, which can lead to multiple boons or even banes. And the Gate, being an organ, is not exempt from its own birth effects. Most people are born with only partially functioning Gates, meaning that large-scale magic is largely out of their grasp, or you could be a character like Anastasia Hoshin, whose Gate was born defective and she is chronically mana deficient. You can also be someone like our protagonist, Natsuki Subaru, who defiantly cast magic against the best wishes of the best healer in the kingdom, and broke his Gate, which effectively sealed off his capability of magic forever. ReZero is a far cry from other isekai stories that haphazardly throw together video game mechanics and RPG interfaces without proper explanation or extrapolation, leading to fairly uninteresting or trite concepts. Stories with boring levels, stats, and spells ripped straight from famous games at the time. This isn't to say that the concept of mana is necessarily unique in itself either, but I'm a firm believer of execution over idea. Mana isn't unique at fucking all, but the way ReZero integrates it into the biology of all living things, and how integral it is to life or its recycling process via Ode Laguna, and the way spells are cast is, to me, interesting, inventive, and complete. We mentioned earlier that the bigger the world gets, the more inconsistencies that you hit, and I would say that ReZero avoids this. Okay. Now that you, the ReZero Glazer, have clicked the like button and left a positive comment, I was lying. It's not true. I would not really say that the ReZero world is all that consistent sometimes. ReZero's scope is genuinely fucking unbelievable at this point. We're on volume 45. There are hundreds of side stories that all dive into different aspects of the world, and yeah, we're reaching the point where the author sorta forgore. In 2014, he wrote that a character had a condition for a power. In 2015, he wrote that actually, it isn't a condition, it's a coin flip. In 2025, he wrote that actually, there is no coin flip, but there is a new condition. That does not fit into the first condition that we learned about. In 2025, he wrote a side story where he wrote that a character knew about something. Then, a couple months afterwards in the main story, he wrote that that character actually had no idea about it. In 2021, he wrote a specific character motivation in an EX novel, but in 2025 went back on it and changed the motivation entirely. In 2025, he wrote about a power that only impacted people with a specific condition. And also in 2025, he made that power impact people without that specific condition. I wouldn't say many of these are very big deals, but it's a clear sign that the further you get into the sauce, the more confusion you might inflict upon even yourself. A non-spoilery one I can talk about are the Boko fruits. This was introduced in the second arc of the story, so literally like volume 2, I think. It's a little nut that you can eat, and it'll stimulate your mana intake for a little bit. It's like a quick emergency doping mechanism if shit's hit the fan and, you need to squeeze your Gate a little bit more. You would think something like this would come up more, and well, it kinda does. There are some side stories that talk about it being distilled into a drug, but you're telling me that for the next 10 fucking years, you're not gonna write about this little convenient tool in the main story and show, some people, dropping a couple nuts, splashing a few quick nuts in a fight or something. Feels a little bit silly to me. Now, even despite my complaints, I think ReZero is exceptionally inventive, I think it is wonderfully complete, and it's 90% consistent. I bring all of this up for a particular reason. All of the world-building elements that I just brought up serve a purpose. It isn't purely to inundate the reader with information, it's to inform you of the specifics of the world and to establish elements of the plot. Mana is plot relevant. Miasma is plot relevant. Gates are plot relevant. Ode is plot relevant. Magic is very plot relevant. It isn't done to simply check off details on a list. The world is flat, which has plot implications, especially for the themes of ReZero. The histories of these kingdoms and countries that we do get to learn about are either immediately relevant to the plot, or are going to be at some point, or serve as functions of a complete world that help immerse you. Its unique life forms are plot relevant. Earth dragons and their established and potentially very lore-relevant history are not mentioned for absolutely no reason. Something I mentioned earlier is that there is more to a narrative than just plot beats, and that's still true. Tertiary world building, atmosphere, themes, and such, these can all serve functions as well, but truly impressive world building to me isn't the stuff that fills the fandom wiki. It's the stuff that invests you into the plot, that lets your fucking synapses fire and make all these cool connections in your mind. The introduction of Gates informs us to the world of Ream Zero and its biology, but it also serves to make you cringe every time Subaru wantonly casts magic because you know that he's going to fuck himself up. Learning about the flatness of the world lets you ponder seemingly background information such as, where did the dragons go? They fled the world and went beyond the Great Waterfall, so what the fuck happened? Where are they? And every time you hear something about the true nature of the world, that constructed investment leads you to speculate, to theorize, to ponder what ReZero is trying to get you to think. And that's, to me, that's fucking awesome world building. Learning about how the Kingdom of Lagunica, the nation where the story takes place, has this stone that tells the future of the kingdom to help it avoid catastrophe, but for some reason, it did not prophesize the death of everyone in the royal family. And then you learn how, you know what, maybe there are a couple of stragglers out there that don't even know that they're royals. So what the fuck killed the royal family? There are a lot more specific things that I find fascinating about ReZero's world, but I don't want to spoil anyone too badly, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. So the reason why I lead this conversation at the start of the video with world building being overrated is because when people talk about good world building, a lot of the times this isn't what they're talking about. A lot of the time, you'll have a vague gesturing at, wow, look at all these locations, or wow, look at all these random concepts that kind of look like a spreadsheet. Back during my 2 tours in the My Hero Academia fandom, the one criticism of the series and many others like it that drove me fucking insane, and still does, was that MHA had bad world building because it's just Japan. Where are the American heroes? What about the heroes around the globe? ReZero also gets similar complaints since a majority of the story is Lagunica-centric. Where's my Kosteko arc? Where's my Kawaragi arc? ReZero has bad world building! Yes, you can show off a big, broad world. You can go through every single country in My Hero Academia and explain how the hero system impacts, I don't know, New Zealand. The question becomes, what are you going to gain from it? Is it going to make the story more cohesive? Only if that was already in the cards. Is it going to add depth to the world? Maybe. That depends on how it's explored. If we go around and spend a quick chapter or 2 in another country on ReZero and then we go back home, what is gained? We've cast the net wider for the world, sure, but we haven't actually meaningfully engaged with them. We checked them off the list, and what we got out of it was surface-level depth, and in my opinion, there's kind of an opportunity cost to doing things like this. I'm a big proponent in efficient storytelling, and that's kind of vague, but basically what I mean by that is, sure, you can spend 15 volumes communicating an idea, right? But, like, did you really have to do that in 15 volumes? Like, what did we gain from it? If you communicated one idea, surely you could have been a little bit more efficient with the amount of text or the amount of pages or the amount of volumes used to communicate something. Hunter x Hunter strikes me as a series that feels broad and shallow in terms of its world. I said in the JJK video I posted, I think, last month that I hadn't read it. Well, surprise, I have now. The world is quite inventive. It's probably consistent. Is it complete? I wouldn't say so. Of course, the author of Hunter x Hunter clearly just focuses on the very interpersonal details of the story, and rather than writing satisfying payoff or rewarding speculation by creating these deeply intertwined aspects of the world, he's quite good at writing self-contained settings. York New, Greed Island, and Chimera Ant jump out as arcs that prioritize the setting that will exist for that arc, rather than the narrative as a whole, and that's certainly one way to do it. It's just not something that feels super enticing to me. Rather than building something up and letting you rattle it around in your head for a while before a climax and showing you how connected the world is, we go from basically totally new setting with totally new cast to totally new setting with totally new cast to totally new setting with totally new cast. There may be, at best, very faint threads that connect these things, like the Chimera Ants and the Dark Continent. But they are more or less self-contained, and while we hear about the many aspects of the world and see how big the map is and, oh my god, it just got way bigger, it isn't much beyond that. Broad but shallow, outside of the established settings for arcs like the aforementioned trio. So when communities are in a particular series, soy jacket an island on the map and go, oh my god, what's going on over there, and there, and there, I can't help but sigh. This type of checkbox world building just doesn't appeal to me. I don't know if there's a proper literary term for this, because it feels like a distinct difference in consumption. Myself personally, I like to view narratives in totality, a sum of its parts. With the world building, the power system, if it has one, the thematic significance, symbolism, character journeys, designs, and so much more, what these things are trying to say and what purposes these parts serve. In my opinion, a narrative is one big breathing existence, and all of the individual organs serve to bring it to life and create the experiences that we interact with. When discussing world building or power systems and such, it seems like people desperately want to separate these parts from the context of their existence. To compare and contrast this part with a part ripped from another series, this world building scaling, this power scaling, I don't think that's an inherently bad thing. I think sometimes people are just having a fun conversation and discussing how things do or don't work in other series. What I'm specifically getting at are the kinds of people who, for better or for worse, learned a writing term. They learned about the concept of world building, and now, rather than being a fan of this larger living narrative, they are a fan of world building. They are going to come at these experiences, these narratives, with the idea of looking at them through a world building lens, no matter how ill-fitting or ill-equipped they are. And when you remove the world building from the context, looking at it purely as a spreadsheet of concepts introduced or islands named, geography shown on a map, cultural ideas briefly referenced, in my opinion, you're putting the cart before the horse. You have to look at how it fits into the narrative. You have to write your story first. And of course, this is my opinion. If you haven't seen this channel before, I'm a big subjectivity guy. Your mileage is going to vary on how you approach world building and its analysis. There is no size fits all, but this is my perspective. When reviewing the parts, the whole is important. Not all world building is going to be created equal. I don't expect Shukura, a romance series between two dysfunctional girls that primarily focuses on them and how those two interact, to be diving into cultural differences between a unique land of people like these big named battle shonen. That would be an unfair comparison on its face, but you can't have that if you're simply doing spreadsheet analysis. If you had two columns labeled world building in big red text and wrote them side by side. Yeah, one would have more points, but we've lost the fucking plot, literally. And I can't help but feel that this flagrant disregard for narrative context and minute nitpicking is inspired by a generation who grew up during the era of cinema sinsification of criticism. In my Let People Enjoy Things video from a couple of years ago, I briefly touched on this. The concept of popcorn criticism, the surface level and literal approach to media analysis that often disregards things done for thematic intent, prioritizing the literal sequence of events. It's a fleeting desire for realism in fiction, a disregard for thematic execution and emotional irrationality, leading to everything having to have lore, having to be understood, having to be understandable from a Wikipedia page. That's what it boils down to. They want a Wikipedia article that contains a list of events to satiate their fandom, not of a series, not of a piece of art, but of a diegetic part that they had ripped out and claimed ownership over. Roger Ebert once said, "A lot of fans are basically fans of fandom itself. It's all about them. They've mastered the Star Wars or Star Trek universes or whatever, but their objects of veneration are mainly useful as a backdrop to their own devotion. Anyone who would camp out in a tent on the sidewalk for weeks in order to be first in line for a movie is more into camping on the sidewalk than movies." And I have to agree, we can expand his criticism of fandom into many broader subjects, fans of lore, of world building, of power systems, power scaling, and that is something that has dominated narrative discussion for a while now. I once had a discussion in my Discord a few years ago with an individual about My Hero Academia. He was coming at it from an angle of criticism for its world building, and one of his chief examples of why MHA had lackluster world building is because we never found out how quirks affected food growth. Something that I think would be fair to call completely and entirely irrelevant to the broader narrative at hand. It was a desire for superfluous information to check off a box and to fill out a Wikipedia page. So I would say world building is overrated. Not because it isn't important, and not because you shouldn't write about it, but because the world building and all the other parts of the narrative should serve the narrative in some fashion. And people's obsession with uncovering every minute detail of a world, or of a story's lore, is an active detriment to their grasp of the understanding of the larger narrative. Hyper-focusing on uncovering the fog of war, like you're exploring a World of Warcraft zone rather than, the actual experiences of that zone that lay beyond. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.